My brother lifted his glass at the rehearsal dinner and said, "To the family that shows up." Everyone cheered. I cheered too. I didn't realize until I was driving home that night that he'd looked at everyone at that table except me when he said it. That was 3 months before the wedding, before the envelope, before I found out what my name had been used for without my knowledge or my permission. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it actually started. Not at the rehearsal dinner. Not even at the wedding. It started 6 years ago in the parking lot of a Walgreens in Columbus, Ohio, when my mother called me crying and said they were going to lose the house. I was 26. I had just gotten my first real job, supply chain analyst at a logistics firm downtown. I'd been there 4 months. I was still figuring out direct deposit, and my mother was on the phone telling me that my father's construction business had collapsed, that they were 3 months behind on the mortgage. And not my brother, who was 22 and living at home and working part-time at a sporting goods store, couldn't help because he was still finding himself. I drove to their house that night. I sat at the kitchen table where I'd eaten 10,000 meals and looked at their bank statements and their mortgage documents, and I did the math on a yellow legal pad, and then I called my bank and set up a recurring transfer. That was the beginning. For 6 years, I paid. Not everything. They weren't helpless, but enough. Enough to cover the gap when my father's freelance jobs dried up, enough to make sure the mortgage cleared every month, enough to quietly wire money to my brother when he texted me those messages that always started the same way. Hey, I hate to ask, but I told myself this was what you do. You don't let your family drown when you can swim. What I didn't tell myself, because it was too uncomfortable to look at directly, was that I was the only one swimming. And they had stopped trying to tread water years ago because they knew I was there. My name is Lydia. I'm 32. I work in supply chain management and I live in a 1-bedroom apartment in German Village, a neighborhood in Columbus where the streets are brick and the houses are small and beautiful, and I chose it because it felt like mine in a way nothing else had. I have a good life, genuinely. Steady salary, a promotion last year. A savings account I've been building slowly and carefully, like something I'm afraid to spook. What most people don't see is the other account. The one that's been draining for 6 years into a house in Westerville that isn't mine. My brother's name is Curtis. He's 28 now. He got engaged last year to a woman named Amber, who is perfectly pleasant and entirely unbothered by the fact that her fiancé has never paid a bill in his life. They were getting married in September, and my parents were over the moon, and the whole family had been in wedding mode since the engagement party, which I also paid for, though that particular contribution was framed as my gift. I was a bridesmaid. I bought the dress. I went to the bachelorette weekend in Nashville. I smiled in every photo. Here's the thing about being the responsible one in a family that has decided you are the responsible one. You stop being a person to them. You become a function, a very reliable, very convenient function. And the cruelest part is that they're not even consciously cruel about it. They just genuinely don't think about what it costs you, because they've never had to. The wedding was on a Saturday in September. Outdoor ceremony, vineyard venue, golden light everywhere. It was actually beautiful. I stood at the altar in a sage green dress I'd bought with my own money and watched my brother marry someone who looked at him like he was everything. And I thought, good, I hope he is. I really did. The reception is where it came apart. We were at the cocktail hour, the kind where everyone's standing in small clusters with champagne and little plates of bruschetta, still buzzing from the ceremony. I was talking to my aunt when my brother came over with 3 of his friends, and someone said something about how Curtis had finally locked it down, and there was a lot of laughter. And then one of his friends, I don't know his name, I've never known his name, looked at me and said, "What about you, Lydia? When's your wedding?" Before I could answer, Curtis laughed. Actually laughed, that easy, comfortable laugh he has, and said, "Lydia doesn't have time for a relationship. She's married to her spreadsheets." More laughter. My mother, standing 2 feet to my left, smiled like it was the funniest thing she'd heard all week. I stood there holding my champagne glass, feeling the smile on my face that wasn't connected to anything real. Then my brother added, and this is the part I keep coming back to. He said, "Honestly though, what do you even do with your money? You live alone, you never go anywhere, you never do anything fun. "You must just be sitting on a pile of it." And my mother said, still smiling, "She's always been so careful." Like it was a gentle dig, like careful was a character flaw. I looked at my brother. I looked at my mother. I looked at the champagne in my hand and the vineyard behind them and the 200 guests my parents had spent the last 10 months telling me they couldn't afford. I said quietly, "I wonder the same thing, Curtis. What do I do with my money?" He blinked. The laughter stopped. I smiled, set my champagne down on the nearest table, and walked to the bathroom, where I stood in front of the mirror for 3 minutes, telling myself to hold it together for 5 more hours. But something had already shifted, something I couldn't push back down. The drive home that night was 2 hours because I had to go slow, not because of traffic, because my hands were shaking and I didn't fully understand why. I'd heard comments like that before. I'd heard worse. But something about the way he said it, "You never do anything fun," with that total breezy confidence, like my life was small and amusing and a little sad. He had no idea. He had no idea, because I had never told him. He had no idea that the reason my apartment is small is because a quarter of my paycheck leaves my account on the 1st of every month. He had no idea that I haven't taken a real vacation in 4 years. He had no idea that every time he texted me, "Hey, I hate to ask," I sat with my phone in my hand for 10 minutes before I transferred the money. Not because I was deciding whether to, but because I was trying to figure out how to feel less like a vending machine. When I got home, I poured a glass of water and sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. I pulled up my bank statements, all of them, 6 years of them. I made a spreadsheet, yes, a spreadsheet, Curtis, because some of us use them for things that matter, and I started entering numbers. It took me 2 hours. I kept having to stop. When I was done, I sat back and looked at the total, $71,000. In 6 years, I had quietly, voluntarily, never mention it, just do it, transferred $71,000 into my family's life. Mortgage gaps, car repairs, my brother's rent when he moved out briefly and then needed to move back, my father's medical bills the year his insurance lapsed, my mother's dental work, Amber's bridal shower, which I'd helped fund because my mother said she wanted it to be special, $71,000, and my brother was standing at his wedding telling people I must be sitting on a pile of money. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my couch and stared at the ceiling and thought about something my therapist had said to me once. There's a difference between giving from love and giving from fear. One fills you, one just empties you. I had been emptying for 6 years. I made a decision sometime around 3 in the morning. I didn't make it angry. I made it calm and quiet, the way you make decisions that are a long time coming. I opened my bank app and I canceled the recurring transfer. The confirmation screen asked, "Are you sure you want to stop this recurring payment?" I clicked yes. Then I closed my laptop, turned off the light, and slept better than I had in months. The calls started on Tuesday. "My mother first, honey. Did something go wrong with your account?" The usual transfer didn't come through. Very gentle, very careful. The voice she uses when she wants something and doesn't want to seem like she wants it. My father, an hour later, less gentle, "Lydia, there's a problem with the mortgage payment. Call me." My brother, that evening, "Hey, can you send me $400? I'll pay you back." I read all 3 messages, put my phone face down, and went to make dinner. By Thursday, the tone had changed. My mother, "I don't understand what's happening. We need to talk." My father, "This isn't like you. What's going on?" My brother, "Lydia, come on. I know you saw my message." I responded to none of them. Not because I didn't have anything to say, because I had too much and I wasn't ready to say it yet. On Friday, I got an email from my father. I almost didn't open it, but I did, eventually, sitting at my desk during lunch. It was 3 paragraphs. The first was about how hard things had been. The second was about everything they'd sacrificed for me. The third, and this is the part that made me put down my fork and just sit very still. The third mentioned that they'd taken care of some things recently and that they hoped I would understand the position they were in. Taken care of some things. I read that phrase 4 times. I called my bank on my lunch break, standing outside on the sidewalk in the October cold. I asked them to flag any activity on my account that I hadn't authorized. The woman on the phone was professional and thorough. And when she came back, she told me that there had been no unauthorized activity on my checking or savings accounts. But there was a credit account opened in my name 18 months ago. I went very still on that sidewalk. I had not opened a credit account 18 months ago. The balance on that account was $19,000. I sat down on a bench outside my office building and I stayed there for a while. Pigeons walked past my feet. A bus went by. Someone asked me if I was okay and I said yes, automatically the way you do. $19,000 on a credit account I had never opened, in my name. I knew before I even confirmed it. I knew the way you know things you've been afraid to look at directly. But I made the calls anyway. I called the credit card company. I asked for the application date, the address used, the contact information on file. The address was my parents' house. The phone number was my father's. The signature, a scan of which they emailed to me when I asked, was not my signature. It was close. It was someone who had practiced my signature, but it wasn't mine. I went back inside. I sat at my desk. I had a 2 o'clock meeting about freight routing, and I went to it, and I said normal things and nodded at the right moments. And then I went home and I called a lawyer. Her name is Patricia Wynn. She's a consumer protection attorney, and she had been recommended to me by a coworker who'd had an identity theft issue 2 years ago. I reached her voicemail the first time, and she called me back within the hour. I told her everything, the 6 years of transfers, the wedding comment, the canceled recurring payment, the credit account. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "This is fraud, Lydia, regardless of who did it. I need you to understand that." I said I understood. She said, "I know this is your family. That makes it harder, but it doesn't make it different." I said I knew. We talked for 45 minutes. By the end of the call, I had a plan and a folder on my desktop labeled simply, Records. I spent the next 2 weeks filling that folder. Every bank transfer, documented. Every text message from my brother asking for money, screenshotted. Every voicemail from my father, saved. The credit card application, the signature, the balance statements, $71,000 in voluntary transfers, $19,000 in fraudulent credit, $90,000 total. The number sat in my chest like a stone. My mother called me every 3 days. My father sent 2 more emails. My brother, to his credit or discredit, went quiet after the first week, which told me he knew more than he was letting on. 3 weeks after the wedding, my mother sent a text that said, "Sunday dinner. We need to sit down as a family." No question mark. No please. Just a statement, the way she'd always announced Sunday dinners, as though they were weather, as though I would show up the way I always had, reliable, uncomplaining, bringing wine. I sat with that text for a long time. Then I called Patricia. She said, "You don't have to go." I said, "I know. I think I need to." She said, "Then go with documentation." I printed everything, 43 pages. I put it in a manila folder and I put the folder in my bag and I drove to Westerville on Sunday afternoon. The house looked the same. It always looked the same. The oak tree in the front yard, losing its leaves. The basketball hoop in the driveway that hadn't been used in years. The welcome mat my mother had bought at TJ Maxx that said home in big block letters, the O replaced by a wreath. I sat in my car for 5 minutes. Then I went inside. My mother was in the kitchen. She hugged me at the door, the way she always did, and said it was good to see me. And the hug lasted a second too long, the kind of hug that's trying to say something she hadn't figured out how to say. My father was in the living room. He stood when I came in, which he didn't usually do, and his face did something complicated, relief or guilt or both, that he covered quickly with a smile. Curtis was there too. He was sitting on the couch with his phone, and he looked up when I walked in and nodded at me, the way you nod at someone you don't quite know how to talk to anymore. Amber was not there. I noted that. We sat down to eat. My mother had made pot roast, my favorite, and I noticed that, and I let myself notice it without softening. There are ways people try to manage you without words, and a childhood favorite on the table is one of them. For the first 20 minutes, we talked about the wedding, how beautiful it was, how the weather held. My father made a joke about the DJ. My mother said she'd already framed 2 of the photos. Curtis talked about the honeymoon they were planning, somewhere in Mexico in the spring. I nodded and ate my pot roast and waited. Then my father set down his fork and said, Lydia, we need to talk about what's been happening. I know, I said. The mortgage. I know about the mortgage, I said. I also know about the credit account. The table went quiet in a particular way. Not the surprised quiet of people who don't understand what you're talking about. The specific quiet of people who have been waiting for you to say something and are now deciding how to respond. My mother said carefully, "What credit account?" "The one opened in my name 18 months ago," I said. "The one with $19,000 on it. The one I didn't open." My father's jaw tightened. "That's not I have the application," I said. "I have the signature. My attorney has already been in contact with the card issuer." The word attorney landed like something dropped on a hardwood floor. My mother's hand went to her chest. "You hired a lawyer?" "Yes, Lydia, we're your family. I know you're my family," I said. My voice came out even. I'd practiced this. Not the words exactly, but the steadiness. Which is why I'm here instead of just filing. My father leaned forward. "Nobody was trying to hurt you. We were in a bad spot, and we thought we'd pay it off before you ever." "You signed my name," I said. "That's not a financial decision. That's a crime." Curtis had been very quiet. Now he looked up. His face looked like someone who'd known something was coming but had hoped, somehow, it wouldn't. "How much have you given us?" he asked. His voice was different, quieter. "Since I started 6 years ago." He nodded. $71,000, I said. "In transfers alone, not counting the credit account." The number hit the room the way numbers do when they're real, not abstract. "Not rounding, $71,000, said plainly at a dinner table. My mother made a sound that wasn't quite words. My father sat back in his chair. Curtis looked at the table. I reached into my bag and put the folder down. 43 pages of my own life, documented. "These are the records," I said. "Every transfer, every amount, every date. My attorney is prepared to move forward on the credit fraud. I'm not asking for the $71,000 back. That was my choice and I made it. But the $19,000 is different. That wasn't my choice." My father's voice was tight. "You're going to prosecute your own parents." "I'm going to protect myself," I said, which is something I should have started doing 6 years ago. My mother's eyes were wet. "We had no one else to ask." "You had me," I said. "And you always knew I'd say yes. That's not the same as having no one." Curtis said quietly, "I didn't know about the credit account." I looked at him. I believed him, actually. Or I believed that he'd made a choice not to know, which is its own kind of thing. "I know you think my life is small," I said to him. "I know you think I sit alone in my apartment with my spreadsheets and nothing to show for it. But do you know why my apartment is 1 bedroom? Do you know why I haven't taken a vacation in 4 years?" He didn't answer. "Because I have been," I said, "for 6 years, quietly, without ever making you feel bad about it, keeping this family from going under. And you stood at your wedding and made a joke about how careful I am." He looked like he'd been hit. "I'm not going to be your safety net anymore," I said. "I'm not doing it out of anger. I'm done because I've been doing it from fear, not from love, and I think we both know the difference." My mother said, "Grace," and then stopped. She'd gotten my name wrong, which she'd never done before, and it sat there in the silence, this small signal of how unmoored she was. "Lydia," I said gently. "Lydia." She pressed her hand to her mouth. "Please, we can figure this out. You can figure this out. You can figure this out." "You can," I said. "You're smart people. You have options I've never allowed you to explore because I've always been there first." I stood up. I picked up my bag. I left the folder on the table. "Patricia will be in touch about the credit account," I said. "You have 30 days to work with her on a repayment arrangement before she files." I don't want it to get to that. But I need my name off of everything, and I need to know it won't happen again. My father didn't speak. My mother was crying quietly. Curtis was looking at the folder like it was something he didn't know how to touch. I put on my coat. "I love you," I said, to all of them, to the room, because it was true and I needed to say it even now. But I'm done paying for that love with my future. I walked out. The October air was sharp, and the leaves on the oak tree were the color of rust, and I stood on the front step for just a moment. I could hear my mother crying through the door. I could hear my father saying something low and short. I walked to my car. I didn't let myself cry until I was on the highway, because that's the kind of person I am, and I've stopped apologizing for it. Patricia called me the following Friday. "The credit card company has confirmed the fraudulent application," she said. "They're removing the balance from your name. Your credit report will be corrected within 30 days, and your father has agreed to the repayment arrangement." I sat down on my kitchen floor, which is not something I usually do. I just sat down and put my back against the cabinet and looked at the ceiling of my apartment. "So it's done?" I said. "The legal piece is done," she said. "Everything else is up to you." I thanked her and hung up. I sat on my floor for a while longer. The afternoon light was coming through my kitchen window, that particular Columbus November light that's thin and silver and honest. I thought about my brother's face when I said the number, 71,000. I thought about my mother saying the wrong name. I thought about the way my father looked at me when I said crime, not angry, not defiant, just tired, like a man who'd been caught doing something he already knew was wrong. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that, because I think people expect a certain satisfaction from stories like this, a clean catharsis, a door slamming, a villain getting what they deserve. That's not what it felt like. It felt like grief. It felt like looking at something you loved and finally seeing its actual shape. 3 weeks later, I took a day off work on a Wednesday. I drove to a state park an hour east of the city. I walked for 2.5 hours on a trail through woods that were bare and gray and quiet. I stopped at a lookout point and stood there for a long time watching the light change on the hills. I hadn't done that in years, not because I didn't want to, because I had always told myself there was something more urgent. There is still something unresolved with my family. I won't pretend there isn't. My mother has called twice and I'd answered once, and we talked for 20 minutes about nothing in particular, carefully, like people feeling for ice. My brother sent me a text 2 weeks after Sunday dinner. It said, "I owe you an apology." More than one. I'm not ready to give it properly yet, but I wanted you to know I know that. I have not responded yet. I will, eventually, when I know what I want to say. My father has not contacted me. That one sits differently. But here is what I know. I work hard. I am good at what I do. I have a savings account that is no longer bleeding. I have a vacation booked for February, 10 days in Portugal, which I have wanted to do for 7 years, and I paid for it entirely with money that stayed in my life long enough to become mine. I live alone in a 1-bedroom apartment in German Village with brick streets outside my window and a bookshelf I built myself and a coffee maker that I bought entirely because I loved it and not because it was on sale. My life is not small. My life was just quiet for a long time while I spent my energy somewhere else. I am 32 years old. I have time. If you've ever been the one your family counted on without counting you back, I want to hear from you. Tell me where you're listening from. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it. Because I think more people are sitting on $71,000 worth of untold truth than any of us know. I've been thinking about cause and effect a lot lately, not in a dramatic way, just quietly the way you think about things when you're sitting by a window with coffee and you finally have enough stillness to think it all. What I kept coming back to is this. The situation with my family didn't happen because they were evil. It happened because I made it easy. Every time I transferred money without saying a word, I was teaching them something. I was teaching them that I would always be there, that my limits were negotiable, that my silence meant consent. I didn't do it on purpose. But I did do it, consistently, for 6 years, and they learned the lesson I kept repeating. That's the part nobody wants to sit with. Not the betrayal. The fraud my father committed was real, and I'm not minimizing it, but the longer, quieter story underneath it. The one where I participated in my own depletion. Where I confused being needed with being loved. Where I kept giving not because it felt good, but because stopping felt worse. Fear is a strange kind of generosity. It looks like love from the outside. It feels like obligation from the inside. And it doesn't actually help anyone because it doesn't come from a real place. It comes from a place that's trying to avoid something. What I had to learn, what I think most people in my position have to learn the hard way, is that real intelligence isn't just knowing things. It's knowing yourself. Knowing why you do what you do. I was good at my job. I was good at numbers, at logistics, at solving problems. But for years, I couldn't solve the most obvious problem in my own life, which was that I had built an entire financial structure around other people's comfort at the expense of my own. That's not generosity. That's a failure of self-knowledge dressed up as virtue. Curtis, standing at his wedding, making that joke about my spreadsheets, I don't think he's a bad person. I think he genuinely didn't know. And that's on me as much as it's on him, because I never told him. I let the fiction stand for years. The fiction that I was fine, that I had plenty, that helping was easy. I thought I was protecting them. I was actually just protecting myself from having a hard conversation. There's something that takes real courage that I think gets underestimated, and it's not the dramatic confrontation at the dinner table. That part was actually the easy part, once I got there. The hard part was the 3 in the morning when I sat with a spreadsheet showing $71,000 and had to decide what kind of person I wanted to be going forward. That decision, quiet, private, nobody watching, that's where character actually lives. Not in the folder I put on the table. In the moment before, when I decided I was worth protecting, I'm not done with my family. I don't think I want to be. But I'm done with the version of myself that shrank so they could feel comfortable. That version of me was not strong. She was just very, very afraid of being the one who let someone fall. Here's what I know now. You cannot build anything real on a foundation of fear. Not a family, not a relationship, not a life. What you build on fear will always eventually cost you more than it's worth. And the moment you stop, the moment you say this ends here, today, you find out very quickly what was actually love and what was just convenience. That knowledge is hard. It's also the most clarifying thing I've ever felt. Portugal is in 6 weeks. I've already looked up the coffee shops.